In this feature video, we're going to take a look at some of the new features added in our MagicQ v1.9.2.1 release. At the moment, this is a beta release and it adds enhancements to some existing features, as well as adding new features as well. So let's dive in and take a look and see what's in this release. As you can see here from our change notes, which are also available on the Camsys website and included in the software, one of the first things you'll see is updates to automation scheduled events. If I open up my automation window in MagicQ PC here, you can see I've got 5 automation events. You can see at 10 o'clock, I should have activated playback 1, 11 o'clock playback 2, then I've bumped go on playback 2 twice at 11:30 and 12, and at 12:30 I've released playback 1. Now it's worth noting here, my system time at the moment is just after 1:30 or 13:30. What we've added now is the ability that when MagicQ starts or you load a show in, it checks through all the automations and will activate what should be active at the current time on your system. So if I close MagicQ down on my system here, and then I restart MagicQ again, like so, what we should find is it should look through my automations and it should determine which automations should be running. And you can see it's now activated playback 2 and it's bumped to the correct queue in there. Now note that playback 2 is a chase, which is why you're seeing it step through the queues at the moment. If I go to my macro automation window, you can see it's showing me these automations are active, and of course playback 1 is not active because it was set to release at 12:30, so it wouldn't activate that playback. We've also added a new global option in setup, view settings, mode for automations here to enable or disable all of your automations. This is particularly useful maybe if you're programming or working on part of a show, you don't want your automations to keep running while you're doing some programming. So you've got a global option here to enable or disable automations. What else have we added? We've added some enhancements to group queues. Now, Chris Kennedy, our software director, did a great video on group queues, which covers these changes here and all of the group queues functionality. So I'm going to point you at this point to look at our group queues video. RDM, we've added a couple of new enhancements to RDM. We've added this option called background check, rig lock and auto patch. Now, if I show you that by going into my DMX.io window, so setup, DMX.io, net manager, view RDM. In terms of what supports RDM, MagicQ on PC obviously supports RDM with supported ArtNet nodes in the configuration I'm using here. Our MagicQ consoles, our MQ250M, our MQ70, MQ50 and MQ80 all support RDM via their direct DMX ports, and the rest of our MagicQ range support RDM via compatible ArtNet nodes. So for example, nodes like our Chauvet NetX2. What we've added are these 3 options on your encoders here. We've added this option called background check. Now MagicQ, up until this point, until you turn this option on, will only poll to discover fixtures when you manually hit the discover all button at the top of the window. We're not sending out and looking for fixtures otherwise. So we've added this option here called background check, which will constantly check and look for new fixtures and update my window here with any new fixtures it finds. What we've also added is this auto patch function, which if turned on, when it discovers a new fixture, will automatically patch it within MagicQ. So if I take my DMX cable here and I connect it up to the fixture on the table here, like so, what should happen then is MagicQ will now start looking for fixtures. Now this happens in the background, it doesn't happen every second, so you will see there's a little bit of delay, and you can see now it's found my fixture. It's found my Chauvet Professional E910FC fixture, shows me the mode it's currently in, which of course you can configure via RDM. You can set its address, you can see how many channels it's using in that mode at the moment. And in a moment, it's going to automatically then go and patch that fixture within my MagicQ patch window for me because I've turned auto patch on. Now, of course, you can just use background check on its own without auto patch, should you wish. And another function which is useful, which we've added, is this function called rig lock. And you can see at the bottom now, it's trying to set the DMX address and it's going to try and patch that fixture for me. I'm going to turn on rig lock. Rig lock here now locks the DMX addresses and modes of my fixtures via RDM. So what it will do is it will capture then what the address and the mode of the fixtures should be based off this window here. And let's say the use of this, you've got some lights on the front of the stage, maybe some moving lights on the front of the stage, and they're close to the audience, they can reach through and they could change the DMX addresses. With rig lock, when this is turned on, it does require background check on, but you don't have to have auto patch on, you can just have background check and rig lock on. Is that will stop people from being able to change the address. Well, no, it won't stop them. what will happen is they can go in, they could change the DMX address, reach across the barrier, change the address of a fixture. RigLock will detect that and say, hang on a minute, that light's now at the wrong address, and it'll automatically set it back to its correct address again. So it will stop users interacting with the rig, accidentally changing the address or the modes of the physical fixtures themselves. If you do that, MagicQ will change them back to what they should be again with RigLock. And now in terms of auto patch, I should now automatically patch myself an Ovation E910 FC in my patch window, which you can see it's done so here. It's patched that in, and I should have control of that. It's head number 436. So if I go 436 at to select it and locate, on comes that fixture. So I just plugged it in, MagicQ patched it for me automatically. So that's some of our RDM enhancements in v1.9.2.1. Going down, there's a small change to 3D pixel mapping. All we've added here is we've allowed you to now, when you're setting depth, you don't have to fill out all of the top layer. So this is useful if you're not just mapping LED strips and things. If you've got maybe a chandelier type thing where you're going to have different layers coming in, you don't have to fill the top layer and have pixels populating below. So it's only a small change for our 3D pixel mapper. The timeline window has also had a few enhancements. If I open up the timeline window on PC here, and here's one I made earlier, open up QStack 10 and open up the timeline window in the editor, you'll see my timeline. Now, of course, the core functionality of the timeline hasn't changed. What we've added is a few enhancements to things like timecode tracks. So if I now go and add a TC track, by clicking the Add TC button, you can see my playhead starts moving, and TC tracks record flash button presses and fader movements, as you can see, and when I hit release there, stops recording that track. Now we've scaled up some of the icons in our timeline for use on consoles. So things like the lock and hide button, they're much more accessible now for use on touchscreens. I started recording a new track there, so if I now expand that track here, what we've added now in this version is the ability to remove whole playbacks from a track. So like I said, I don't want those fader movements in that track, but I want to keep the flash button presses. And just to show you how these are working, if I run up my playback 10 here now, you'll notice when my playhead gets to the point here, it's going to flash through those presses there, like so. Of course, Timeline Editor in our last release allows you to lasso select items and move all together, like so. So in this version, obviously, we added the ability to remove individual playbacks, but you can also remove the association of a timecode track with the playback that's running your timeline. So a timecode track, what it actually records in the background in your macro window, view macros, is it creates a step of macros of you pressing those flash button presses. And all it's simply doing is that step sequence of button presses or fader movements, it's assigning those onto a playback. So in our timeline window, you can see here, this is track 1 on QStack 12 here, which is a QStack number. I could break that link and use the remove key there to remove it from being linked to my playback anymore, but it still exists in my macro window. So one of these macros here, probably this one here, macro 41. If I view the data on it, you can see my playback 4 and 5 flash button presses. So that macro still exists. I could run that macro, and of course it keeps the same timing. There you go, you can see it flashing playbacks 4 and 5. And if I wanted to, then I could go and assign it to a different playback if needed. So in the timeline window, we also made a change to scrolling in the timeline window. So if I open up the timeline again, you can see that when I run my timeline window here, the playhead normally would scroll left to right. You've got the option of your center playhead on your Y encoder here, and let's just wait for the playhead to move off screen. Now normally I'd expect the window to jump like so here and move me up to the next part. If I hit center playhead on, you can see the playhead now sits in the middle. If I now pause my timeline using the pause key, what we've added in this version when you're using the center scroll is the ability for you now to scroll the window as well. And when I restart, it would jump me back to where the playhead was. So that's a new function added in v1.9.20. So a couple of enhancements to the timeline window. Some of the other changes in this version, for our Stadium Connect, the new Stadium Connect product, we've added encoder toggle so that when you're changing between the encoder function, because it's got 4 encoders, you've got the encoder button, it now visually shows you in the software which of your 4 encoders you're now using. Continue on our stadium range, for our MQ500M wing, we've added some new configuration options for the crossfaders. So the Stadium MQ500M wing and the Stadium MQ500 wing, it's got dual crossfaders just like the console does. In the MagicQ software, if I release this timeline, go to Setup, View Settings, go to Playback, you've got this new option here, Wing Crossfade Master function, which is the dedicated crossfaders on your wing. So you can have the crossfaders on your console doing something independent of those crossfaders, maybe using your crossfaders on the main console, one as a submaster, one as a single crossfader. Over on your wing product, you can now have your crossfaders doing things like Q stack and rate masters, or extra Q stacks. You can assign it to Q stacks 4 and 5, give yourself essentially 2 extra playbacks on the wing. You can see the options listed here. And finally, in this version, we've made some enhancements to some of our head files and handling of those. One of the biggest things we've done is we've added multiple dependencies to fixtures or head files. So a good use case of those is fixtures like our ARRI sky panels. If I've already patched one of these in the show here and I select my sky panel, what we've done with these multi-dependencies means that now in ultimate mode, so mode 31 if you used the sky panel before, you've now got all of the dependency ranges in the same head file. You no longer have to morph between Lee, Roscoe, etc. mode on there. So if I go to color page 2 and I bump up to something like, say, gels mode, here, go back to page 1, you can see I've got my color temperature on the A encoder, brightness, and then I can select the filter manufacturer, color parameter 3, and of course these are all labeled on the encoders so you know what they're doing. I can jump between Lee and Roscoe. In Lee, I can go in color correction, color filter, whatever, and then on my E encoder allows me to pick my gel, and again, press and hold, list of gels, choose your gel. If I want to go to Roscoe, I just bump up to my Roscoe filters, bump into whichever I want in the Roscoe series, so Roscoe color correction series, and then go and again, pick my gel, and it's applied onto that panel. So we now support multiple dependencies for fixtures like the ARRI sky panels. And keeping in that vein with film and TV style fixtures, for KinoFlow fixtures and other fixtures that support X and Y control directly on them, so we're not mixing in RGBW, we're mixing in XY coordinates, so CIE XY mode. I've patched here a Diva light, and here we've got X and Y here. So we've added a new XY color control mode when we're creating our head files, and our color picker and our visualizer now support color mixing of the CIE XY fixtures directly in the color picker, and also the visualizer is supporting XY colors as well now, so we'll actually show you those colors. So that's the new features and functions added in our v1.9.2.1 MagicQ release.